Hey, Jeff, thanks for joining me today.
Hey, it's great to be with you, Billy. Thanks for inviting me to be along with you.
So, I want to talk about your story because you have a very fascinating story. You entered the military when you were only 18 years old, and I guess we'll start there. What was it for you that led you to that decision so young?
A couple of things. I got in trouble when I was in school and was looking for a way to get out of my hometown because I knew I was heading down the wrong path. And the military just, I knew that it would give me a sense of self discipline that I didn't have. But more than anything else, when I finished high school, I was in one of those towns that there's really not a lot of future for you. I mean, there's almost no industry, no real way to support a family. And so I kind of joined the military like everybody. I was looking for adventure. I needed a little self discipline, but I was also looking for a way out.
See, that's amazing to me, though, too, that one of those components for you was recognizing being on the wrong path and knowing that you were going to get that structure, in the military. That's a pretty mature thing, actually, to think at 18, even if you're making the wrong choices, you're getting in trouble, that if I do this, it's going to be helpful for me. Uh, how did you find, like, what was that transition like then going into the military? Was it shocking? Was it easy for you?
Well, I didn't really know what to expect, so that's hard to answer. I didn't have anybody in my family that was steering me towards the military. I didn't really have a lot of military experience, almost no military experience in my family. So when I showed up, I was just kind of didn't know what to expect. Um, I joined the Army though, just because of that desire, and that really, it wasn't a desire. It was, I was looking at the path my life was heading and thinking, I'm going to end up dead or in jail. So I signed up to join the Special Operations in the United States Army's Ranger Regiment because I just literally asked the recruiter, give me the toughest job in the Army because that's what I need to get my life back on track.
See, that's amazing. So you knew and you went in and you go in, and that's interesting. You obviously didn't know what to expect. And so I would imagine you adapt and you move and you grow as you go. And you had a very long career in the military. This is sort of a broad question, but I think it's one that I have not had military experience. And I'm sure there are 1,000 answers to what I'm about to ask you. But what would you say the biggest values you took away from your career in the military were? What were the big sort of structural takeaways in terms of who you are as a person, what you learned along the way?
Without a doubt, the Army helped me become a man. In fact, when I retired from the Army many years later, even when I had a chance to tell people the difference that it made in my life, I will readily say I am the man that I am today because of the military.
Mm.
Now, that's not the job of the US military to turn you into a man, but that usually happens as a byproduct. For me, the thing that had the biggest impact, far and away above everything else, was the quality of the guys that I served with. And these guys made me want to be a good man, want to be a really upright man. And so if I left the military with nothing else, no other accomplishments, just becoming the man that I am today, I think I'm a bit indebted to the military for what it's done for me.
That's amazing. And I know serving comes, it's such an amazing thing and such a thing to be honored. It comes at a great cost for a lot of people in terms of time and family and not being able to always be there, right? Because you're abroad and you're protecting the country and you're doing one of the most difficult jobs imaginable. What was that part of your journey like? Because you served a lot overseas and obviously have been involved in some very major events that have unfolded. How did you balance and manage that difficulty of being away from family?
Yeah, that's one of the most often asked questions I have ever received. I think like number two on the list of most often asked questions. Guys and gals that are considering serving in the military or those that are serving are saying, how do you do this? How do you do service to the country and be part of a family at the same time? And I'll tell you, it's hard. I wouldn't have done it if I wasn't a patriot. I love my country and I considered it a great honor to serve my country. But not only did I make some sacrifices, my family made some sacrifices. And I tell people, listen, I married my high school sweetheart. We're still married. We have 5 children. They're married. We have grandchildren. Look, if we didn't do anything right or anything special, if we can make a relationship work in the military, anybody can make a relationship work. But it's hard work. And I don't want to act like it's not.
Yeah. Well, I would imagine it's hard work. It's a lot. You know, those events, those things that are happening with your kids, with your family that you can't be there for. I would imagine that's very difficult. And the thing, just kind of going back to your story when you went in to the military, because I've seen a lot of the things you've spoken on. You give incredible talks, incredible sermons, and messages about faith. But when you entered military, you said you kind of had that choice between something very bad is going to happen with my life if I don't do this. And you made that choice. At what point for you did faith come into the equation? Because obviously, again, we see what you're doing now, the work you're doing now, it's incredible. But when did that journey start for you?
Yeah. I joined the military as an enlisted soldier, went straight to the Ranger Regiment as a infantryman, and spent 13 years in the military, in the Army as an enlisted guy before feeling a call to ministry and becoming an Army chaplain, and eventually retired with almost 23 years in the Army. But long before I even talked to a recruiter, before I ever showed up in the military, I had this rock solid faith. And I say that because when I get a chance to share my story from time to time, I tell people I had this a goal by going into the military. And one of the goals was to test my faith. Now, I'm not saying put God to the test. I'm saying kind of test my faith and to see how genuine my faith was. And without question, the military tested my faith a time or two along the way. But I know I wouldn't have been able to do the things that I did in the military if it wasn't for this rock solid faith in Jesus Christ as my King and Savior.
And how did you first encounter Jesus? And I before you answer, this is, I think a lot of times in Christian circles, we assume that people will have this moment. And I think everybody does have a moment where it finally clicks. But what I've noticed from talking with so many people about their faith journeys is that some people do have that. They have that instantaneous encounter with Jesus and everything changes. And then there are other people who are on a little bit of a longer journey through that process before that moment where it clicks. What was your journey?
Well, first, Billy, let me say thanks for pointing out for the people out there that kind of were raised in a Christian home. I don't ever want those folks to feel like I got gypped and my faith journey isn't as awesome as the crack dealer or the prostitute who had this spectacular event in their life. In fact, I tell people, look, if in light of the way that we should be raised, that's the way it should go. You were just raised in a home where people talk to you about Jesus all the time. And then at one point it just started to make sense. And it was kind of always part of your life. That's just not how it went with me. I didn't grow up in a Christian home. My parents didn't go to church. They divorced when I was young. And I really never had anybody talk to me about Jesus until I was 13 years old.
Wow.
And at 13 years old, my neighbors came to talk to me. They explained the gospel to me for the first time in my life. And it was like literally like a light came on. And I was like, oh, I understand. I didn't know these things. I didn't understand these things. My neighbors didn't put any pressure on me. They just kind of explained the truth of who Jesus is and what he's come to do for me. And then they left it up to me. And I thought about it. I considered it. I got out of my bed one night, a very definite moment that I'll never forget. I knelt by the side of my bed at 13 years old, and I asked Jesus to change me, and he made a radical difference in my life.
See, that is incredible. And I think too that this misconception that you're never going to have a mistake or an issue unfold once you become a Christian. You know, for me, I grew up in a Christian home, right? So I had a different story from you, but I think I really struggled when I hit college, and I went through a period of time where there were a lot of struggles and not great decisions. And then it really made sense to me at some point in college, you know, so it was there, you know, I had this faith, but it was in my head and it had to get into my heart. And so for me, yeah. I had this moment where it started to really make sense, and I made it my own. It wasn't my parents anymore. It wasn't because people told me, I needed to go to church and do these things, it really clicked. And so, yeah, everybody's journey in that regard is so different. I loved hearing yours. And those neighbors, it's interesting because I had a friend when I was in 8th grade who wasn't a Christian, wasn't a believer. And I don't even remember this conversation, but we were talking about evolution. And I was, repeating some things I had heard as a Christian and challenging him, and reached out to me recently, 25 years later, and was like, listen, that conversation we had actually ended up coming back to me, and it helped lead me to faith later on. So we just never know this conversation you're having as a kid. And that's hopefully an encouragement to parents who are trying to raise their kids, the right way too. But, well, that's incredible to sort of hear that journey. So when you're in the military now and you're going through what I know is obviously moments of loss, the most challenging moments that a person could go through as a Christian, and as somebody who, as a chaplain as well and in ministry, was guiding other people through that, how do you journey through that level of loss, and how do you help others around you do that? And I know it's another loaded question, but I'm just fascinated, that dynamic of the hardest moments mixed with that strong faith. How does that work?
Yeah, I really genuinely don't understand how somebody can go through those toughest moments in life or the deepest grief in life without a solid faith, without believing in something that's bigger than you, even bigger than life itself. I don't really know how people handle that. So personally, when I faced many combat tours and when I was in those firefights, and some of them that I believe to be absolute certain death, I just simply surrendered what happens next. Now, I'd already surrendered my soul, but I surrendered what happens in the next few moments. God, I'm going to do my best as a warrior, but what happens as a result of this battle tonight is totally in your hands. And in the midst of a few moments of absolute certain death, I had this, what I believe is a supernatural sense of peace. So much peace, in fact, that my friends who were watching me on the battlefield said, man, you have something that I don't have, Jeff, because I was watching you last night, and you were totally calm when everyone else was in panic around you. And when they asked me, how did you do that? They were asking me, like, what training do you have that I don't have? And I was like, man, it's not training.
And how can I get that training?
Yeah. And I try to tell them, like, look, this is just my faith. I nailed down life or death when I was 13 years old. I settled that one. So everything else after that's easy. But as an Army chaplain, years later, I had been one of those sergeants in the firefights multiple times. And then when I'm an Army chaplain, people are coming up to me because they know my combat experience and they know my background. And they're going through some really tough things, and they're asking for my advice. And they're asking me, Jeff, how do I do this? How do I get through it? And I pointed them all the same place that I went to. I told them, you got to turn it over to somebody who is much bigger and much more capable than you are of handling it. David, the great prophet, warrior, king of Israel, said, when I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, you're with me. And I used to tell warriors, the thing that makes all the difference in the valley of the shadow of death is to know that God is right there with you. And if he's not with you, I don't know why you're doing this. Like, you're in the wrong line of work.
That is, that is powerful. And I would imagine too, the comfort that people would have knowing that you had gone through these things. You're not just some guy coming off, not that, listen, you don't have to have gone through something to help, but in that environment, having gone through that and then being the person that people can go to, you understood it. You had been through it. You've dealt with the Black Hawk Down scenario. You've dealt with so many different things. So this question, I don't know if it'll be hard for you to answer, but what was the biggest challenge to you, perhaps even to your faith, specifically throughout your career, and how did you journey through it?
Well, without a doubt, the toughest, persistent challenge, the thing that I just always struggled with throughout my career. And by the way, this may not encourage any of your viewers, but I'm still struggling with this, is the challenge of time and giving the right amount of time to the thing that deserves the right amount of time. There are a couple of opportunities I had in the military that are things that I really, really wanted to do. and they really would have changed my career, but I chose not to do them because I understood beforehand what this would cost in the time that this would cost me away from my family. And those were honestly some rough, hard decisions to make. But I wanted, at the end of a career in the military, I didn't want just some awards on my uniform and some accolades from my peers. I wanted my family to still be with me. So I just struggled trying to get the balance right, or trying to juggle my time well. And like I said a moment ago, man, I'm still working on that. It's something that I sometimes spend more time away from my family than I want to, and I have to be careful about it.
That's a struggle I have too. I think that is really relatable for a lot of people, especially when you feel called to do something or there are opportunities before you. And then even praying about the time commitment. We're like, God, okay, what do you really want me to do? And part of it is the journey. What do you want me to be doing for you? And the other part of it is, what do I need to do for my family to make sure? I mean, that's really a big piece of that puzzle. So that actually is encouraging, though, because I think people who are deep in their faith, to hear that that is a challenge still for people, that makes the rest of us who are still dealing with it feel like, okay, you get it, right? Now you have also been very vocal on obviously faith issues, and recently you have talked a lot about the Dating Project, which is a film that we have on Pure Flix. And it's interesting because the Dating Project, for those who haven't seen it, it deals with relationships and culture and kind of where we are right now. What was it for you, obviously in a ministry role and your interests, that sort of drove you toward wanting to be a part of that?
Well, there's two things that really got me passionate about this project. I have the chance to see dating from all different angles. And I don't mean that I'm currently dating, because I'm not, been married for 30 years, but I get a chance to see people that are in the process of dating, people that are trying to figure out dating, and then people that are recovering from what I refer to as the carnage of doing this poorly, and just what culture is doing to relationships. And what I saw in the Dating Project was a movie that is trying to help steer people through. This feels like a minefield. And if you just go dancing blindly through it, you're going to blow yourself up along the way, maybe more than once. So the Dating Project really feels like, hey, we're going to guide you carefully through this minefield so that you don't come away with a lot of scars. And I'm talking guys and gals now. So I watched guys who approach dating wrong early on, and then I know them 5 or 10 or 25 years later, and they're still dealing with the effects of it. I've watched ladies that are struggling with trying to figure this thing out and trying to understand how to date well. And they're trying to get their arms around this thing. And of course, I'm concerned about the whole dating culture in America and where this thing is heading. So when Netflix asked, I jumped at the chance to be part of it.
Culture feels so chaotic in so many different ways right now. Why do you think, and I would say the last 10 years especially, dating has gone the way that it has? Like, just relationships have gone this way, and you see it in the film, that the internal chaos that people feel just trying to normally go out and find somebody to date. But why do you think we've ended up in this place?
Yeah, I think it is basically we've really become experts at the physical aspects of dating. A man and a woman getting physical with each other, but we're really, really ignorant about the emotion or the heart level connection. And frankly, our grandparents' generation, they understood how to connect with the opposite sex at the heart level much, much better than we did. They figured out, hey, the physical part comes, it will just take care of itself, but the emotional part, you got to work on. And what I think has happened is we've gotten so inundated with the physical aspect of a relationship that we have become completely clueless about the emotional aspect. The Dating Project shows this, like ladies who have been very physically active but don't have the first idea what to do on a date, or a guy who's been with multiple girls but literally doesn't even know how to talk to a girl.
Yeah.
Knows how to be with her, but doesn't know how to talk to her. Or when a young woman looks at a guy and says, "Where is this thing going?" She just gets a deer in the headlights look because he's incapable of giving her an answer. And I'm thinking to myself, what is wrong with our culture that we're not comfortable with our hearts anymore, or even able to express our hearts to the opposite sex?
Well, yeah, I mean, you look at Hollywood and TV and movies and media and the depiction of what a relationship should look like, and the fact that this physicality is just a part of what you do. It's just that's the driver in every movie and TV show you watch. And it's interesting because I know there are lots of different schools of thought about this, and it's something I've studied a lot. But when you look at the effect of that long-term media on people, you can almost draw a graph out from the year 2000 to now, and you can actually see these things dovetailing together. The increase of this sort of content on television and movies, our consumption of it, the increase of that on our phones everywhere, and then this end result of course, people are confused about where relationships go. We haven't seen great examples of relationships anywhere and what they should look like, right?
Yeah. I have the privilege of speaking. I've known many warriors that are still dating and trying to figure this one out. I've got a chance to meet them and to steer their, the women that they're dating or the guys that they're dating through relationships, and even got a chance to do a lot of pre-marriage or marital counseling. But I also have the chance to speak on a lot of college and university campuses all over the world, actually. And in America, there's this really disturbing phenomenon where there are 23, 25-year-old guys who have never been on one date in their life and don't know how to talk to a woman. 23, 25-year-old women who have gone on one date and it was a total disaster and not sure that I want to put the work in for the next one. And it's basically the inability to relate to the opposite sex. And I think the dating project, it's at least a starting point to say, hey, let me give you 2 or 3 principles that can help you figure out how to talk to the opposite sex. It's disturbing the amount of guys that would tell me, I don't even know how to talk to a girl. I don't even know where to start. And I'm 24 years old and have no idea where to start because I've never really talked to a girl in my life. I'm like, wow.
It opens that conversation, right? And that's what I think is so great about the dating project. And I want to thank you for your time because it's been so great getting to kind of hear your story and then hear your passion for this. Where can people go if they want to grab more information on you and your ministry in life?
You can go to my website or any of my social media channels. Just look at jeffstruecker.com. And maybe, Billy, you can throw some links up there for everybody.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate your time today.
Yeah, man. Thanks for inviting me to be with you.